Some losses don't sound like explosions. They seep in slowly, tightening a fine web of silence until it becomes clear. There's no way back. She searched for validation in arguments, in tears, in drama, believing them to be proof of love. But he chose silence, the craft of simple gestures, and patience that needed no shouting. When she challenged him, convinced his quiet was a mask for indifference, he didn't resist. There were no scenes, no pleas for forgiveness, only calm acceptance. And in that stillness, she saw the truth for the first time. He hadn't left. She had destroyed what she never truly understood. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watch this video. I value every one of your comments, so let's get started. At 23, Harper had never been one to pause and weigh the consequences of her actions. She lived by instinct, driven by emotion and a relentless hunger for certainty. In her eyes, love only felt real if it was intense, charged with fire and friction. From the outset of her marriage to Caleb, she expected him to embody the passionate, dramatic lover she had grown up imagining from stories and screenplays. She longed for grand, sweeping gestures, flares of jealousy, declarations shouted into the night. To Harper, stillness felt suspicious, and comfort seemed like distance in disguise. But Caleb stood in another chapter of life altogether. At 38, he had already endured heartaches, faced failures, and emerged with a quiet understanding of what love could truly be. When he met Harper, he hoped for something lasting. Caleb approached love like a craft, built slowly, shaped by care, trust, and quiet loyalty. It wasn't something to be performed, but something to be nurtured. Over time, though, Harper began to feel something missing. Their talks were pleasant. Their life together, smooth. But predictability made her restless. She wanted combustion. To her, each day should echo the climax of a romance novel. So when Caleb came home fatigued and sought rest, she heard apathy. When he suggested cozy weekends in, she interpreted it as detachment. The discontent grew. Doubts whispered louder. Did he still love her? Or was he just going through the motions? The more Caleb leaned into calm, the more Harper pulled toward conflict. Tiny annoyances became long, exhausting arguments. She provoked him, tested him, needing evidence that he still cared enough to fight. She craved proof. Then, one day, she made a decision she believed would force clarity. She ended the marriage. But it wasn't meant to be the finale. It was a strategy, a provocation dressed as finality. She believed the separation would jolt him awake, that he'd come running, desperate to fix things. She imagined a wave of emotion finally breaking through his calm exterior. Pleas, promises, tears. She prepared for the confrontation like a performance, cold lines practiced to elicit a reaction. She pictured his panic, his regret, the storm of messages and calls. It was all meticulously staged in her imagination. But reality offered no such drama. When she looked him in the eye and said it was over, Caleb paused. He inhaled, steady and soft, met her gaze and replied, "If that's what you want, I understand." No arguing, no protest, no breakdown, no pleading. Just quiet acceptance. His lack of resistance stunned her. The absence of reaction hurt more than any harsh word. She had braced for chaos and was met with stillness. She had crafted a script for a dramatic climax, only to find the curtain quietly falling instead. It was then that the truth began to take shape. Maybe Caleb had already let go. She left with her suitcase, looking back, expecting him to follow. He didn't. 2 days later, he sent a brief message offering to help with the legal logistics. That single, neutral text pierced deeper than silence ever could. To Harper, his composure felt cruel. But Caleb wasn't being unkind. He was simply worn out. For 2 years, he had poured himself into building something lasting with someone who saw emotional tension as a measure of love. He had been patient. He had listened. He had tried. But Harper had mistaken his maturity for emotional detachment. She had confused stillness with disinterest, believed that true love was messy, fights followed by tears and passionate reconciliation. But Caleb wanted peace, not turbulence. He wanted a partner, not a performance. His silence wasn't punishment, it was self-preservation. Over time, he came to see their love as conditional, a fragile transaction where affection was tested constantly, where one wrong move could mean rejection. His eventual surrender wasn't sudden. It was the result of many nights spent feeling inadequate, scrutinized, and emotionally exhausted. So when Harper finally walked away, thinking she was in control, Caleb had already left in spirit. From the outside, Harper looked unshaken. She told friends she had done the brave thing, posted quotes about strength, projected relief. But underneath the surface, she was unraveling. Caleb's quiet exit was far more devastating than any shouting match could have been. His silence wasn't one of heartbreak. It was the kind that follows closure. And for Harper, that was the most painful revelation. She hadn't just lost him. She had lost the illusion that she held power in the relationship. For the first time, she had to sit with the outcome of her own choices. There was no one left to blame, only the emptiness she had created. That's when the truth finally emerged. What she had called love had really been a quest for constant reassurance, a need to be proven worthy over and over. In the days that followed, Harper tried to rewrite the ending. She wore the role of the wronged woman like a mask, told anyone who'd listen that Caleb had become distant, that she had given everything, that he had changed. She repeated the version where she was left behind, misunderstood. But beneath all the stories, she knew. The unraveling hadn't been his fault. It was the inevitable result of a narrative she refused to stop writing, until the day he quietly set the pen down and walked away. Each word she uttered carried the weight of a silent request, an unspoken yearning for someone to validate what even she struggled to accept as real. To her inner circle, she offered curated versions of reality, edges softened, facts distorted, stories shaped to fit a more sympathetic lens. Her mother, ever loyal, assured her she was worthy of someone who truly recognized her value. At university, where she had built a reputation for being friendly and approachable, she painted herself as someone trapped for years in a cold, loveless union. But the tale started to lose cohesion. The cracks emerged subtly at first, small inconsistencies that disrupted the flow. Then came uneasy pauses, hesitant reactions from those unsure how to respond. A few close friends began to sense a rehearsed cadence in her retellings, like lines practiced one too many times. That's when Avery stepped forward. Caleb's older sister, never particularly close with Harper, had always maintained politeness out of respect for her brother. But when Avery heard how Harper was publicly portraying Caleb, something shifted. She reached out. No pleasantries, no small talk. Her voice was blunt, her message direct. She wasn't buying the story. Avery reminded Harper that many had seen Caleb putting in the effort, trying to salvage what they had. She pointed to Harper's pattern of emotional outbursts, her tendency to stir chaos, her unrelenting need for affirmation. The call was brief, firm, and unshaken. Avery didn't raise her voice or hurl insults. She simply laid out her perspective with the calm conviction of someone who had seen enough. Harper was blindsided. She tried to push back, but her words fell flat against Avery's resolute certainty. In the days that followed, the online atmosphere shifted. Her emotionally charged posts drew fewer reactions. Messages that once offered comfort now came to a halt. On campus, former classmates began averting their eyes in passing or steering conversations elsewhere. For the first time, Harper felt something unfamiliar. Doubt, but not her own. Doubt cast by others, reflected back at her. The story she had once held so tightly began to slip through her fingers. And the more she tried to hold on, the faster people drifted away. No one directly called her out, but their body language and sidelong glances said everything. Rather than step back and examine what was happening, she doubled down on denial. She told herself everyone else had it wrong. Avery must have been fed lies. Caleb's friends were twisting the truth. There was no way it could be her fault. So she clung to the story she'd built, desperately patching over the growing fractures. What hurt most was realizing that Caleb's silence was working against her. His refusal to engage, to explain, defend, or respond was undoing everything she had constructed. He gave her no words to attack, no response to twist. There was no visible adversary, no easy flaw to exploit. Instead, the emptiness he left behind became a space filled with an unspoken truth. Her pride wouldn't allow her to admit the illusion. She could no longer tell if she was deceiving others or herself. Eventually, that line vanished completely. She told herself she had been brave to leave, that she deserved something more. But the more she repeated it, the hollower it sounded, even in her own mind. Once greeted with understanding and support, her declarations now landed with indifference. Professors who had once admired her responded with cool formality. Students who used to sit beside her casually found new seats. Friends began disappearing without dramatic exits, just slow, steady withdrawal. The truth she feared wasn't revealed through confrontation, but through quiet absence. People understood more than they let on. Her hardest moments came in the early hours, staring into the mirror, trying to maintain the persona she had constructed. You can keep up a performance for a while, but eventually the mask cracks. The body remembers. Harper felt herself going numb. Her sleep became restless. She started arriving late. The activities she once used to distract herself no longer worked. There was nowhere left to run. She had built her identity into a corner, casting herself as the broken heroine in a narrative that could no longer support its own weight. The truth didn't explode into the open. It slowly emerged through patience, through a brother who refused to respond to lies, through a sister who refused to pretend, and through the natural decay of a false story pushed too far. Harper stood in the ruins of something she had constructed piece by piece, every lie a brick, every exaggeration a layer of mortar. Now, all she could do was witness the collapse. She had tried to shape how others saw her, revise memories, and repaint her past. She thought that if she repeated the fiction enough times, it might one day feel like home. But Caleb's silence remained the one variable she could never account for, the gap in her control she couldn't close. She began longing for a different resolution, something that could redeem her choices. A reconciliation that would reframe everything as a misunderstanding. More than anything, she wanted Caleb to need her again. Not out of love, but out of longing, so she could believe that none of this had been in vain. So that maybe she could forgive herself, so others might too. She started checking his profiles again. She made a fake profile just to silently follow his Instagram stories. Each new post became a breadcrumb. A grinning selfie sparked fury. A group photo ignited envy. Whenever he shared something introspective or reflective, she saw a chance to slip back in. Before long, she began frequenting places he might appear. She even found herself standing outside his office, pretending it was a random crossing of paths. Eventually, one of her orchestrated accidents landed. She ran into him, all ease and design. True to form, he greeted her with polite detachment. When she suggested grabbing a coffee to clear the air, he agreed. Not because he wanted a reunion, but because he was ready to close the chapter. So they sat across from each other, her outfit carefully chosen, her pulse unsteady, eyes searching his for any hesitation. But what she found was composure, a peace she hadn't prepared for. He hadn't come out of yearning. He was there for resolution. Harper opened with lines she'd repeated to herself countless times. She said she'd been lost back then, that she'd felt unseen, convinced he had emotionally checked out long before things ended. She used words like mistake, regret, and second chance. Caleb didn't interrupt. He just listened, and the quiet unnerved her more than anger ever could. Then, he reached into his coat and brought out an envelope. He told her he hadn't kept it to punish her, but to honor the truth. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside were 3 photographs. Clear shots, taken from different angles, all showing the same scene, her kissing another man outside the university library. In one, they were laughing. Her hand clutched his backpack casually. The timestamps were clear. All taken within the same week, a week when she and Caleb were still husband and wife. The realization hit like a physical blow. Her skin went pale, her throat tightened. She stammered, scrambling for a way to soften what was already undeniable. She said she had felt alone, that it hadn't meant anything, that she just wanted to feel seen. But her voice lacked conviction. They were the kind of excuses spoken only when you already know they won't matter. Caleb remained steady. And then, in a voice low but sure, he said, "You ended this long before you admitted you were done. And now you want to come back, pretending none of it happened." She began to protest, but he raised his hand. "You lied to me. Worse, you lied to yourself, and then painted yourself as the victim," he said. "This was never about love. It was about ego." She reached across the table, hoping something remained. But he pulled back, not harshly, just with the calm certainty of someone who had finally moved on. He paid the bill without fanfare and stood to leave. Before he walked away, he turned back one last time. "You had a good man, and you threw him away for something you still can't define." And with that, he stepped out of the cafe, like a man locking a door that would never open again. Harper sat frozen, envelope still in her hands, her cheeks flushed. She didn't cry, not in public. Her pride wouldn't let her. But deep inside, something split open, and for once, she had no one else to blame. What echoed afterward wasn't his silence. It was hers. The months dragged on. Harper stayed in the same town, walked the same streets, saw the same familiar faces. But the warmth in those faces had dimmed. There was no scandal, no whispers in hallways, just a subtle, unmistakable shift. Not because Caleb had shown the photos, he never would, but because people sensed the story anyway. Invitations to old college hangouts quietly stopped. The cafe where she used to bury herself in textbooks now felt cold, foreign. Her world grew smaller, the same world she once believed she controlled. She tried to focus on school again, but her mind wandered. She scrolled through social media endlessly, only to feel worse watching others live with vibrancy and ease. She attempted to date, to flirt, to distract herself, but it all felt empty, like lines from a poorly written script. Nothing filled the hollow space. Guilt came and went, sometimes sharp, sometimes wearing the mask of defiance. But the truth never changed. She had driven Caleb away. Not because he failed her, but because she kept pushing boundaries, testing limits, until there was nothing left to break. And now she finally understood. Some lines once crossed can't be redrawn. They don't just break trust, they fracture everything. Then came the party, a university gathering filled with familiar faces, old memories, and awkward reunions. Harper decided to go, thinking she could prove she was fine. She chose her outfit carefully, applied her makeup with precision, and practiced smiles in the mirror. She entered the room with little more than the shell of her former confidence, doing her best to ignore the glances cast in her direction and the low murmurs trailing behind them. She had just turned toward the refreshment table, intending to pour a glass of water, when she saw him. Caleb stood not far away. There was something different about him now, lighter, more at peace. His features were relaxed, his body language unguarded. Beside him was a woman whose presence exuded calm. Her brown hair was tied neatly back, and her demeanor was effortlessly graceful. Someone nearby introduced them without ceremony. "This is Caleb, and this is Camille." That was all. Yet when Caleb turned to Camille, something in Harper gave way. A quiet, internal breaking. She knew that look, the one he gave Camille. A soft, sincere gaze filled with unfiltered affection. The kind of love she had seen before, but had never fully returned. The kind she had never been able to hold. His fingers were loosely intertwined with Camille's, but the moment between them conveyed more than touch. There was understanding in it, a quiet synchronicity. The sort of connection Harper had once tried desperately to build, only to watch it slip through her hands. What hit her then wasn't just isolation, it was the weight of recognition. The deep, unmistakable truth that she hadn't merely lost a relationship, but had ruined something that could have grown into something remarkable. While Harper had been busy calculating her next moves, shielding her vulnerabilities, and chasing after affirmation, Caleb had chosen a simpler course, one of clarity, one of emotional honesty, and a fresh start that no longer included her. Around them, conversations bloomed, laughter rang out, glasses met in celebration. But for Harper, everything sounded far away, like she was listening through a thick wall of memories and sorrow that hadn't found closure. She left before the night came to a close, quietly, without drawing attention. In the dim, quiet stillness of the parking lot, she walked toward her car alone, carrying the cold sting of a loss that belonged to her alone. No eyes watched her go. No voice called after her. For the first time, she didn't attempt to frame it, didn't worry what story others might assign to her departure. She didn't blame anyone. She just accepted it. Because some regrets don't explode. They settle into you slowly, embedding themselves in the spaces you thought were empty, whispering truths that never go silent. She returned to her routines, resumed her studies, met new people, searched for purpose in what remained of the life she'd reshaped. Yet the ache didn't leave. It stayed, subtly altering how she evaluated her decisions. And when her mind drifted back to Caleb, what she felt wasn't longing. It was reverence. A quiet respect that had arrived too late to matter. Meanwhile, Caleb moved forward. His days grew steady, filled with ease, walks with Camille, honest words exchanged in the calm of morning light. A future that unfolded gently, with trust and intention. The kind of life he had always hoped to live. He never mentioned Harper, carried no resentment. To him, that chapter had ended long ago, with silence, with patience, and with a sorrow that matures you from the inside out. Harper had learned her lesson the hard way, that real love doesn't demand hardship to prove itself. And that mistaking peace for passivity is one of the most devastating errors a person can make. Because in the end, those who dismantle the calm offered by a kind heart are often the ones who spend the longest time missing it. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.